Well, very good. Welcome, everyone. This is Glenn Thompson. I'm going to start right now. It's about 3 after the hour. And again, welcome. And I believe we have contact, audio, and visual. My name is Glenn Thompson, and I've been working as a mentor with Pacific Trading Academy, as you see on the screen. If you choose to reach us, you have the website information, www.pacifictradingacademy.com, our toll-free number, 800-339-8588. Head of admissions, and any questions you have concerning that or any of the programs you want to talk to Peter Newman. Let's see, I started to say a guy I used to work for, Peter Butel. Will we be sending, someone's already got a question. No, we don't send them out. Well, I'm not sure. I don't think so. Murat Buren, who handles our distribution and computer work, I don't believe we do that. I know we archive the recorded programs on our site. If you want to get the details on that, if you'd like to obtain a copy of any of the programs, this one or any of the past ones that I have done, or any of my coworkers and other mentors, contact us at the information you see on the screen. Request, I guess Peter Newman would be the person you want to talk to, and then he can refer you to Murat or whoever to get the details on how to actually access, or if you want to get a copy. I'm just not certain on that, but I do know they are there on the site for review in the future. And you guys who have been here and attended previous presentations already know you can interact with me during the course of the presentation, kind of in real time via the control panel on the right side of the screen. So great. Probably as I check periodically, if there are any questions that I think would allow a consistent flow of the slideshow, I'll do so. If I deem that a question would kind of better be addressed so as not to break the flow, I'll wait till the end and kind of come back and address it as best I can. This is a presentation I gave, last spring, I guess, about April or May, so almost a year ago. And again, market math, the key to successful trading. So let's get started. I am a technician and I utilize the technical approach. I got to get a new picture, folks. Anyway, but an aspect of this, and to get very specific, I want to highlight the importance that I place underlying all approaches. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That is my phone going off, another phone. I thought I muted that out, but and I can't reach it, so just disregard that, folks. So one of the components underlying, I believe, all approaches, whether it's technical, fundamental, and certainly quantitative, is the importance of a numerical foundation, and the importance of math and arithmetic processes and mathematics in general. So that's what I want to highlight in certain aspects of it. Those of you who are regulars to my programs know that my particular area of market research kind of is in cyclical analysis, and all of those factors that relate to market timing. I refer to it as the neglected dimension of market behavior. I place a lot of emphasis on price. I do subscribe to the fundamental, most central tenet of technical analysis, and that is that all information that is relevant and all information that's irrelevant, any and all information, is implicitly contained in the price. And I do completely buy into and agree and utilize and attempt as much as possible to make my decisions based on that central thesis of the technical approach. That being said, I believe, and this is where there's a little difference of view, and that's not bad, it's not good, it's what I think gives me some great edge and advantage, but I believe that the reason the markets do what they do, and the way they discount and absorb information in terms of how the price absorbs information, is in direct consequence to certain specific elapsed magnitudes or periods of time periods. So it is central, and I believe that there's a numerical basis for this. So let me start in the beginning. In the beginning was the point. The best graphic I could find was this little whatever, this icon here to represent a point. Think of a singularity. So I'm going to try, the first part of this will simply be a little theoretical, and then at the end I've got some practical application points. In the beginning was the point, so we have to start somewhere, and that's a geometrical concept, but it is closely aligned with kind of more of a philosophical numerical idea, but we have to start somewhere. So there was this point, and let's see if I can point the, all right, let's, next came expansion. So in terms of moving forward from the point, the most universal and most obvious unbiased way for which life as we know it can expand from a point, there became a circle. A circle is unique, and it has to do a lot of, it's central to a lot of the day-to-day analysis that not only myself, but a number of technicians do, whether they know it or not. The whole concept of harmonic analysis, which I think is a component and a foundation of what people like Gann and Jensen and more recently Robert Krauss and Robert Miner and a lot of traders, knowingly or unknowingly, utilize the geometric shape or structure that we know of as a circle. An important component of why a circle is so central, not only to financial and security analysis, but in everything in our universe, it has infinite degrees of symmetry or components of symmetry, and as such, it is an interesting figure or concept to consider, and it plays a central role in a number of the modes and models of analysis that I use to help make projections. The circle connotes repetition, and one of the second probable, the second in the hierarchy of important ideas or principles that underlies the technical approach is that history tends to repeat itself. Maybe not perfectly, but there's a semblance of consistency. That which has been shall be. And to that extent, if it does, we can use that concept in a very simple and straightforward manner to generate certain projections. And this helps us considerably, or helps me at least, in my forecast for markets. All right. And so numbers were born, and it never ends. The most basic and stable of all the numbers are the prime. Let me just clear this. Are the primes. There's only one exception to this. The exception is the number 1. 1 is not considered to be prime. Folks, for those of you who may have forgotten your junior high or high school math, prime numbers are to the field of math what atoms are to the field of, understanding our world. They're the basic building blocks. It doesn't get more basic than that. So in a sense, a prime number is a number which has only itself and the number 1 as factors. 1 is an exception. 1 is special for its only, it closely correlates with the singularity, the point. So that is the exception. It meets the rule of or the definition of what constitutes a prime, but it is, however, for certain reasons, accepted from the field or the set of prime numbers. But think of prime numbers as just the basic building blocks. I believe more deeply, if we transcend the boundaries of what I want to talk about specifically today, that is analysis for markets and trading, it is more general. But as it relates to, insofar as that would relate to our technical or whatever analytical tools we're depending on to make our investment decisions, numbers are important, and primes are a special set of numbers that acquire and take on even greater importance. They are the building blocks of all things mathematical, and as such they can help us to the extent we learn about them and learn how to manipulate them and learn how they interact. All right. The primes orchestrate and regulate everything, even energy. So a little pun here, this is a little corny, I realize. 7, which is prime, is active. It does something that the next two numbers in the sequence don't do. It eats 9, or 8, 9. Running joke, I just couldn't resist that. But the point I want to make, that this is just a little pun on, is 7 has a property, it being prime, that the two numbers to the right don't have. They are acted upon, they are more dependent, they arise as a consequence. Were it not for 7 being and its primeness, 8 and 9 would not have any importance. The fact that 7 does something to them props them up and elevates them, and they are certainly dependent with respect to a more important number such as a prime, such as 7. All right. And so it was that certain primes determined that at the 24th harmonic of the circle they would take a much needed rest. So I'm bringing two different concepts here. The importance of harmonics, the importance of harmonics, and that of the circle. A circle is infinite, and in that it has infinite symmetry, regardless of any and all adjustments, changes, transformations you make to a circle. It retains all of its properties. It is indistinguishable. If you rotate it, you cannot distinguish its new state after completing a rotation from its previous state. If you flip it, if you transform it, if you add it, that's what we mean by the degrees of symmetry, and it has infinite amount of symmetry, and as such it on the one hand. On the other hand, it's never ending and it's never beginning. So that's an interesting concept. When I speak of harmonics as it relates to this mathematical idea, we're typically referring to important multiples of something important. Usually, let's think in terms of a number and or important fractional parts. So when I am specifically referring to the 24th harmonic of the circle, we normally think of a circle as comprised of, we break it up typically into 360 degrees. If you were to divide that into 24 equal parts, that's what this phrase, the 24th harmonic, is alluding or referring to. That would be 15 degrees. Each 15 degree of traverse or change on the circumference of a circle represents 1/24th, the 1/24th, I should say, harmonic of the circle. And it turns out that at those points, they are what we refer to as high energy points. There's a lot of energy. There's a resonance capacity at harmonic points of a process and or of an object. So in this case, I'm starting with the idea of an object, that is the circle. And if we consider the circumference of the circle, that being a critical component of what we define and think of to be a circle, the other being the center, and then there are points thereof, there the phase, there's the radius, the diameter, etc. But if we consider for the moment the circumference of a circle, and if we were to travel or traverse along that, at any given arbitrarily selected point, 15 degrees, we will arrive at a particular harmonic point, meaning it is of greater significance. There's a point on that location that would be conducive and more highly than average correspond with energy and change. And this is important, and here's a jump I'm going to make for those of you who are with me to tops and bottoms, reversal points in financial market, be it a stock, be it a commodity, be it a spot currency pair if you're a Forex trader, whether you're on a high frequency tick chart on one extreme, or if you're on a quarterly chart looking at hundreds of years of data or the entire history of a market and all time horizons in between. Harmonics are the reason, in terms of a deeper, more arithmetic or mathematical way of understanding why some of the foundational principles for different types of analysis are relevant to doing the analysis on the financial instrument. They harmonic points in a system or in a process are why that system or that process changes when it does. And so very specifically, if we're talking about a changing point or a point of change for a stock, let's say, meaning a top or a bottom, that's just the parlance we use. But a top or a bottom, looking at it at that level or considering it at that level, occurs and forms simply because it is a point of harmony. It is a point of harmony, meaning it is greater probability, there's a greater chance or likelihood to allow for the energy that's appropriate to facilitate a change. One type of change is an outright 180-degree shift of course or direction. A component or a phase or an attribute of the system that has previously been in effect or in dominating shifts. And we call it, at a very common or just easy way to think of it, the normal parlance, tops and bottoms. Well, there's a reason for it. These are resonant portions of the system's orbit that are more conducive to creating resonance, that is allowing the energy in to facilitate an adjustment or a shift or a change of behavior. All right. So it's as if these primes determined, certain numbers are orchestrating this process underneath the surface. If you're looking at a price chart of whatever market you're tracking and attempting to profit from, one of the focal points that is certainly salient, and I would argue that because they're, tops and bottoms are certainly an obvious ways of thinking of this, points of transition. What's the underlying causative agents or vectors or parameters that are bringing that about are ultimately, at the end of the day, certain specific prime numbers, I believe. All right. There's this chart for those of you again who are less interested in the theory. Bear with me. I'll again at the end of the program I'm going to have some specific trades that we can all look at and dissect for profit. But again, the purpose is to show you the link between the theoretical relationships and even more deeply looking at the numerical relationships that are responsible for and underlie these physical relationships that in turn manifest on a price chart in the real world, which if we more clearly understand, we're able to exploit more efficiently and in a better way, thereby increasing our odds for generating return consistently. Conjunction resonator, the word conjunction, con, the Latin con, meaning coming together. So when things come together, imagine this is just a circle. It's not coincidence that I have a circle again. This is the center of the circle, analogous to the point that was the singularity, analogous to the number 1. And then when you move from there and create some polarity, why do we need polarity? Let's think of Newton's first law. For every action, Newton's first law of motion, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. There is no possibility of any change unless there is a polarity. Once you have polarity or duality, you have change, and the most unbiased, neutral type of change is an expansion in all directions and all ways equally. There's no bias, no arbitrariness. And the net result geometrically from a point, the logical extension in terms of if we were thinking topologically, meaning just a shift of what we have present to what's the most unbiased, unarbitrary or non-arbitrary possibility is to move from a point to a circle. Every point on the circle bears an equal or holds an equal relationship to the center of the circle. There's no difference whatsoever. There's a uniformity. There's a purity of uniform. But in any case, imagine that these vectors, these lines represent spokes on a wheel, the circle being the circumference and these straight lines being spokes. If one is stationary around the pivot point, we rotate the other line, at some point they're going to overlap or superimpose. All right. Imagine that there's an energy field within those two boundaries in here, let's say. At some point the energy, if as they get closer and closer, as they approach the limit and become what we refer to as conjunct, or creating a conjunction, there is no room available. There's zero space. What a concept. If you have a room, imagine with the place where you are within the sound of my voice at this moment. Wherever you are, if we were to equally and simultaneously press on the ceiling, press on and raise the floor, lower the ceiling, and constrict the sides of the cube within which you are present, assuming you are, unless you're outside something, you might be, but even that conceptually. But for the moment, just think of this. At some point, to the extent there is any matter contained in that space, if we constrict the space into the limit, where will that matter go? It has to go somewhere. In the limit, I always tell this to the traders and people that I consult, and it's a piece of advice a professor told me years ago when I was struggling with a problem, and it astounded me. It's a simple idea. For me, I don't know about you, how you will respond if you haven't heard this idea, but to me, upon first hearing, it was the most absurd thing I could conceive of, but it has enabled me to often see things in markets and in my analysis that has given me great results. And that is, when you've considered all of the possible and you still get nowhere, or you reach a point of informational diminishing returns, consider the impossible. You have nothing to lose. Anyway, when the energy is constricted to the point where in a space, as we rotate one of the vectors around the point such that it becomes conjunct with the other thing, there's no space, the energy contained, if we had a mass of positive charges and negative charges, as a later slide will show, and we know from Physics 101 in junior high or high school, whenever you took basic science, opposite charges repel each other. So imagine the frequency of repulsion as the constriction becomes ever greater and greater, to the end where in the limit they are overlapped. There's zero space. Okay, so I know it's hard for me still to understand this and intuitively comprehend. There's zero space, but there's mass contained within zero space. How can that be? Well, there's only one other possibility. The energy must squirt through this center point to some other region where there exists a space. Mass cannot exist where there is no space for it to exist within. So by definition, by default, in a sense, there is a squirting or an escape mechanism where the energy present where there was one space, now that there is no space, it must release to an area where there is space. It essentially squirts at an infinite energy spike, in a sense, theoretically, to the other side. And in the real world, this happens. This is a concept that a number of our day-to-day mechanical devices that we take for granted in the world we live in today utilize and depend on. But in any case, the particular frequency of the waves of resonate that the energy squirts across is equal to the radius of the circle. So the bigger the circle, the larger the wavelength of oscillation. The smaller the circle, the smaller the radius, the lower or the smaller the wavelength of the energy that is making a transit from one portion of the circle to another. At some point, if this energy reaches a threshold, it will escape. Out to the circumference, and it will go in equal directions, both in a clockwise sense and in a counterclockwise. All right. I just illustrated an arrow showing the clockwise direction. And as it continues to travel, it turns out that it will have traveled about 3 wavelengths, the wavelength being equal to the radius of the circle, once it reaches that initial 1/24th harmonic. That's interesting. Remember, if you divide the 360 degrees of a circle into 24, you get 15. It goes evenly. 24 into 360 is 15 degrees. If you were to measure the distance of the half of the circumference, it's 3 times the radius, you see. And the radius, that those of you 3.14 remember pi in whatever it was, junior high or high school, whenever you took geometry or whatever. So this is an interesting energetic harmonic in that the difference between the conjunction, let's say the conjunction occurred right at the point on the circumference due east, and we call that 0. And then 15 degrees, a transit along the circumference would be 15 degrees around it. There's a difference. I'm interested in the ratio between the distance that the market would travel, or that the energy would travel when it gets to that initial harmonic, which is 3 times the radius. And so 3.14, there's approximately a difference of 0.14 relative to the 3.14, which is equal to the 1/2 of the circumference. If you were to measure the length, if you were to take a piece of string, let's say, to do this, I want to make sure this is real for you guys. If you were to place a string around the circumference, because this is not a straight line, it's curved, and just mark off at this point and at this point 1/2 of the circumference, and then stretch it out and measure it, it would be equal to 3.14, which is the number, we use the symbol, the Greek letter pi, times the length of the radius. That's how long 1/2 the circumference is. That's why 2 pi r is equal to the entire circumference. So if we take away the 2, just pi r, that's half this distance. Okay, so if the energy that were to leak out, if we had a conjunction occur out, and just so much energy as it squirts through this area where there is no space to space, if it overflows the system and breaks out of the system, and essentially, folks, this is why Thompson bottoms, lest I get lost in a theoretical jungle here, this is the theoretical reason why a top or a bottom or a turning point on a chart occurs. Essentially, the market fills up at that point with so much energy. Why and how can that occur? Because it's such a highly resonant point. Resonant points in a system and in an object are resonant because they allow for a lot of energy. They are conducive they are receptive to being filled with energy. If the energy is of the right type and reaches a magnitude or an amount of beyond a certain threshold, it has to go somewhere. And if you surpass the boundaries of the receiving vehicle, the container, the only place for it to go is to break out or to escape. And that's essentially what this is theoretically showing of what a conjunction resonator does. And it's why when we refer to an escape as the market, forms a top and reverses, it breaks the mode of the previous mode of translation and starts something new. Something old is destroyed, allowing for the onset of a new regime. And it's an energetic phenomenon. In a sense, this is the ratio of the difference that the distance the energy travels as it makes its circuit around the circumference of the circle. The difference between the 3 radii and the actual point of conjunction is 0.14. So that's what I'm interested in. That's this little fraction here. I'm interested in the difference in the ratio of this, and that's 0.044. So if I take that fraction of 360 degrees, it works out to 15.8. I round it up to 16 degrees. Well, the closest even number, this is 16 technically. It came out to the, if I round it up, 15.8. But the closest even number that goes into 360 evenly is 15 degrees. That's why the 15-degree interval, as we're marching away, or as a system that would be on the circumference of the circle makes its transit around, is such an important point on a circle. And it turns out that harmonics of the 24th harmonic, meaning fractional parts of it, 1/2, 2 is a very important determiner of important harmonics, meaning things that are anything that's fundamentally important. So I'm submitting or suggesting that the 24th harmonic of a circle, simply thinking of this as if you were to, the 24th fractional part of a 360-degree circle is intrinsically and fundamentally critical. If it is, 2 times that, 48, I can expect will also be an important number, and it is. Okay, it's not as important as the ones I've listed here for certain reasons. And and 1/2 of that, 2 and the reciprocal of 2, meaning 1/2. So thus 12. 1/2 of it is important, 6. This is why where so many things in our entire universe work off of the 6th harmonic, the hexagon, their logarithmic spiral. If you think of so many the components of an apple, if you look at it geometrically, there are actually 6 parts. It's not coincidence. In our entire natural world and in universe, components, this harmonic is so important. It's not coincidence. It's a consequence of energy, which in turn has an underlying mathematical or numerical basis. All right, as we'll see. And ever since, there has been nothing new under the sun, meaning that it is a large portion of the structure we see in our universe ultimately is a consequence of these energy relationships. Harmonics are important because they represent fractional parts of important energy continuums, and as such they allow for energy to reinforce, thus perpetuating or ending a system's operation or a system's trajectory. And that's and this will translate as a theoretical or to a theoretical underlying set of relations that is responsible for, in my estimation, the majority of market behavior we see day to day on any time frame, on any financial system. Even when you have, I chuckle sometimes to myself when I hear people say that it's impossible, especially at the old views going back 30, 40, 50 years ago in academia. A lot of finance professors and the old views and old paradigms and models of market behavior and motion assumed that market behavior is purely random, and as such you cannot game or acquire at any point or any phase in the motion, or as market behavior forces or forges forward through time. It is impossible, or it's ill-conceived that one could acquire edge. Well, any trader, and traders, we've been effectively trading for more than 200 years now, but any trader, not any trader, but those traders, any trader that has been successful over the longer period of time certainly understands intuitively, if not theoretically, that you must have periods of persistency. You must have trends in effect in order to profit. Where all price action constantly mean reverting, you could not in any way form a trend. There would not be any persistency. And as such, it would be, that would be consistent with an older paradigm. But in the last 30 years in particular, what has become, what has replaced the old kind of Markowitz theory is Pareto-Levy theory, which is simply saying it holds that when we go through periods of more random type of price action, that is a special case. And yes, there are periods where markets are more chaotic, more random, the complexity ramps up. That being said, there are other periods where there's more persistent phases of motion. People like Hurst, J.M. Hurst, have created all types of statistical filters that are do allow us to determine the likelihood of a cycle or a market's trend to persist or not persist based on things like the Hurst exponent. This is a game, I call it the chaos game. I can't remember the gentleman who developed this, but see the little triangular type structure, this little picture. I just wanted to demonstrate thing to bring us back to the importance of prime numbers. I guess this is the best diagram. If you just drew a circle here, and then if each of the 3 points of the circle, the tripodal points, you label them, say this would be point 1, 2, this would be 2, 3, or 1 and 2. Each point of the 3 points on the circle would be assigned an ordered pair. Say 1 point is 1, 2. This would be 3, 4, and this would be 5, 6. The reason we want to give them an ordered pair corresponding to each of the 3 corners or points of a triangle are that it will correspond to the 6 possible outcomes relative to a common die. So we're going to roll the dice, creating, and that's the actual physical component that serves to represent the randomness of processes. And so, yes, there are periods in market motion that are demonstrably more random. So we're going to create a little thought experiment. Let's say if we had this geometric, drew a triangle, and then at each point of the triangle assigned an ordered pair. 1, 2 is one corresponding to 1 point. I don't know why they didn't demonstrate it. This is not correctly drawn here. This should be, well, the 3 points of the 3 vertices of the triangle, but in each one we would have an ordered pair. Let's say it doesn't matter which is which, but one would be 1, 2, one would be 3, 4, and the third would represent 5, 6. And so you pick a random point anywhere within the circle. And the object, and the way we're going to play this game is you roll the die. A single, even, unweighted, unbiased, perfect die, in a sense. Okay. And so and based on whatever comes up on the die, whatever is up at the top, is going to be whatever number we're going to go from the starting point. And again, you select the starting point somewhere within the boundary of the figure, of the structure, anywhere. So you just start the game with a point. And what we do to proceed forward through the process is, with each iteration of the die, of throwing or tossing the die, whatever number comes up, you move from the starting point, or you move with the first, to start the game, you move from the starting point 1/2 the distance to the number that came up. So if I got, let's say this is 3, 4, and if I get 4, I'm going to go from my starting point half the distance to that point. And that becomes your new starting point, and then you repeat the process. You ultimately, through a series of purely random tosses or die, rolling of the die, in a sense, you're going to get, out of pure randomness, a very deterministic structure. You will get this. If you do this however many times, 10,000, 10 million times, you will get a perfectly deterministic end result. So how is it that a purely random process, throwing a die, we could extend a die, throwing the dice, or rolling the die in this case, because that's how this particular creates purely, we move from pure random to, which we associate with chaos, and technically it's different, but we can come to, from something purely random to something purely structured and deterministic. That's an interesting, and I submit that primes are underlying this and responsible for this behavior. All right. Harmony, harmonic proportion, the ratios of differences. And this is what's important in financial markets. It's also important in music. This is why people like Gann, people like Murray math, so those of you who maybe ventured off into some of his interesting analysis. I believe Murray took and extended on Gann's work and Jensen's work and a number of other, Harriman and Wyckoff's work. But in any case, there is interesting parallels between mathematical ratios that we find in intervals of music, and harmonic proportion is also the mathematical ratio of price intervals in financial markets. These are simply some of the more important harmonic ratios, and I use them, particularly 3/2, which is this, the 3/2 and the 4/3. That's the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. The octave here, the doubling, the whole tone, the 9/8, etc. These are very important. And there are a lot of Fibonacci. You see some of the Fibonacci numbers here, obviously, for those of you who recognize it. But these are just an evidence of this. The perfect fifth in particular, 1 point, you can decimalize at 1.5, and 1.33 is the perfect fourth. This is just a diagram to illustrate market moves. This is the stock market. I think this was the S&P. Connie Brown is a big proponent. I think I got this out of one of her books. I don't want to really, that's to realize the reason that perfect fifths and these intervals or harmonic intervals occur ultimately are a result of certain primes, certain prime numbers. They are more important, but they create the harmonic relationships. Harmony in motion, perfect fourth plus perfect fifth equals an octave. I'm not going to go into the details of how we do the math here. It's very simple. It's not, but that's beside the point. This is her with, this is Connie Brown's, or it's not hers, but she just illustrated in one of her books, I think. The most important ratios are the octave, the 2/1, the 3/2, which is the perfect fifth, the 4/3, which is the perfect fourth, and the 9/8, which is referred to as a whole tone. All right, and I use those. Those of you who do a little GAN analysis may know of the square of 9. This is a mathematician, Ulam, I can't remember, and this is widely published study. Up above, this is just a spiral. Similar, it is a kind of a chirality. It's the mirror image of GAN's square of 9 chart. Everything is the same. On the upper picture here, everything is the same as the square of 9, except it's the mirror image. It's been reflected. It's the symmetrical version. It's reflected 180 degrees around the vertical axis. So what he did, he was a mathematician, and he started with a price spiral. This has been, people have been doing this since antiquity, so this is nothing new in and of itself. GAN, I'm going to jump ahead here. GAN basically said if we want to understand the cause of market motion, he gave us a clue, and he said the squares of the even numbers and the squares of the odd numbers will give us considerable insight as to the cause of price action. So that's really looking at market analysis from a fundamental viewpoint. You know, isn't fundamentals cause and effect? I'm trying to assess the relevancy or lack thereof of a set of fundamental factors. I take a look at all of those factors that I feel are relevant, and I try and derive an intrinsic, or what, if you're trading stocks, a book value for that stock, and then compare it for what the market's value is, and you determine immediately the degree to which it's either correctly priced or undervalued or overvalued, and then you know if you should sell it or buy it, or go long or go short. Well, anyway, this is just a spiral, but it has a kind of a right translation. It's going counterclockwise. The standard square of 9 configuration is clockwise, but it doesn't matter. It's the same concept, and due to symmetrical, based on the symmetry, the same properties will hold. But here's the interesting step. He eliminated the picture at the top versus this just contains only the primes. He eliminated all numbers other than the primes. All right. So that's the difference between the picture at the top, the graph at the top, versus this picture at below. The one at below simply retains all prime numbers. If you continue doing that, and you did computer work, you just iterated this out tens of thousands of times, primes working overtime, you will see a pattern if you can. If you can't, trust me, it's here, of these diagonal type structures. If you can see, there's a saliency, there's something that sticks out if we kind of consider, are there any patterns? The idea is, is there an order? Maybe that's not immediately discernible, but by certain manipulations with a focus on the primes, can we discern and extract order where there would otherwise simply be perceived chaos? So what happened, okay, first step, we go from all numbers, the spiral at the top, the second one down below, we are eliminating only all of those numbers except the more, in the hierarchy of importance, just the primes. On that continuum, you eliminate all primes except those primes which either above, below, or next to are connected, immediately connected. And what you get is a component we see, the logarithmic spiral. We see this how often in nature? The spiral, the array at which the skin of a pineapple, or is, all right, the spiral of a nebulae galaxy on an even greater scale. The spiral in the pattern of especially male hair growth, if you think about it. The spiral of a snail shell on a smaller scale. The spiral, this being the center and the periphery of a hurricane. It is not accident that a large portion, I mean a very, 80, 90% of all natural phenomena in our world, in our universe, on every scale, and to the extent financial markets are a reflection, are a correlate of activity day to day, human activity and extensions of human activity, I want to pay attention, it would make sense, to phenomena that present in our world surrounding us. And if I can dig or drill down deeper into that phenomena and find an underlying cause, clearly from a fundamental standpoint, I'm a technician, yeah, but I'm not impervious and not. I don't want to purposely be unaware of any type of information, fundamental, technical, quantitative. You know, my area of research is cyclical analysis and timing in particular of all sorts. That's not strictly speaking technical. It's not strictly speaking fundamental. It's not strictly speaking quantitative. I don't know what it is. I don't care. These are just the best that a language can do to put us in the ballpark of, in terms of our efforts at translation of meaning and energy, so that I can convey to a counterpart trader what my intent, what my thought, what my projection is, so that there can be some conveyance of understanding and we can possibly agree or disagree or reinforce, or at least, again, the primary objective is to transfer meaning. But in any case, again, we went from pure, utter complexity, this up here, a maze, everything. When you have processes that are random, they fill up the container, meaning that, and there's no way or means by which we can differentiate and thereby extract edge. To the extent I begin to create biases, okay, so we took an initial step. We eliminated all of those components of the system that were not prime, and we only leave the primes, and we begin to see some pattern. As we further restrict the subset of primes, that there is a hierarchy of primes. Not all primes are created equal, I should say. As we do this, we begin to see emergence of pattern and saliency, and to the extent you as an observer of a market see something that the trader on your left, the trader on your right, the trader who lives across the street from you, the trader who lives in Timbuktu on the other side of the world, if you see something that your counterparty, that when you pull up your screen and you see the volume, and you know that those volume numbers are comprised of entities like you, or in the world today, 2016, we even have robotic traders. We have algorithmic code, whatever, but that had to come from somewhere. We're talking energy and an intelligence. Somewhere, somehow, there is energy that's running the show. To the extent you are manipulating that energy and can discern structure where your counterparts don't, is the extent to which you have an intrinsic advantage. And break time for primes, I submit the structure comes out relating back to the circle, wherever changes occur that create real salient, obvious on a price chart, a top forms after having come up for so long, or a bottom forms at the end of marking the end of a bear market. And it's a break time, meaning those points of resonance on the corresponding in my analogy to the circle at the 15th degree of transit around the circumference. That is a critical harmonic. Harmonics are fractional parts of the 24th. One half of which is 12, one half of that which is 6. That's the sextile. Very strong energy. Every 60 degrees of transit, and this creates the hexagon, which is the underlying platform for a logarithmic spiral we often see in natural processes that are in the process of growing. It's not pure, it is not coincidence at all. It's not coincidence that R.N. Elliott based his principle of waves analysis on the Fibonacci numbers that embody these energetic ratios. None of this is coincidence, and it's highly dependent on these harmonics, the sixth harmonic in particular, which is a smaller portion, or it's a scale version, if you will, of the 24th harmonic. This is just a further reiteration of the little example I gave of the conjunction resonator a few slides back. Without the circle, just if we were to create a conjunct, a coming together of this line, number 2, and keep one line stationary and rotate one around the center point, a pin right at the center. If you have a region of positive charge within those two boundaries, it's a finite space. If we progressively and incrementally decrease that space such that the finite goes to infinitely small, How can, again, something exist within no space? It cannot. So when you've considered all that's possible, take into account the possibility of the impossible. Where would that something, the charge, go? If we have nothing but a region of positive charge, remember, just a starting de facto concept, like charges repel each other, opposite charges attract each other. So if I have a region on the right side of this picture consisting of nothing but positive charge, as it gets closer and closer together, the frequency of repulsion will proportionately increase so that it becomes infinite. It's got to go somewhere, as this line, as it rotates around its axis, ultimately is perfectly aligned with point 1. It creates the ultimate surge at a wavelength equal to the radius, and it squirts to the other side. So this is, if I could dynamically, if I could bring motion to this slide, this is the starting point, this is the ending point, where what was previously up here now has been replaced. Let's say it shifts to they shift position, and so the polarity of the spaces shifts as well. Actually, I should have, when I think about it, I should have shown this slide in the order of events to give you greater understanding prior to adding the circle to it. It might have been easier, but I'll be happy to answer any questions on that. This is the logarithmic spiral that I won't go into. This is just the little equation that defines it. Needless to say, that's the math of that is not, it's very straightforward, very simple, but the point I want to make is that hexagons, logarithmic spirals, growth patterns in markets, it's not coincidence that the Elliott model the bull phase consists of 5 waves and 3. All of these numbers that constitute the Fibonacci sequence do so because of the importance of primes in setting up the important harmonics on a circle. The reason we get logarithmic spirals in nature on defining the structure and architecture of a snail's shell, the shell of a snail on one small extreme, and defining the shape and structure of a hurricane, or the shape and structure of a spiral nebulae galaxy on an extreme scale, let's say, has nothing to do with, it's not chance. It has to do with energetic harmonics, which are in turn determined by certain specific numbers. I submit the primes. And the 6th harmonic, it was determined, stimulates growth, development, in all life. That's why it's not coincidence that there are 6 geometric components to an apple, a piece of fruit. I'm just using that as an example. That's not, is not as if it's in any way unique. That's pervasive. That's ubiquitous. Specific evidence of primes. The 1/12th root of 2 is an important number for the octave doubling. I use this number, 0.142857. I won't tell you, that's a little secret. I'll just dangle that carrot out there. This number enables me to make highly accurate projections so I know when a market's going to turn. Is it perfect? No. But within certain acceptable, plus or minus, if I'm on a daily chart, 3 units of time. If I'm on a 10-minute chart day trading or a 5-minute chart day trading, within 3 10-minute, say 30-minute windows. This is why, in principle, I always tell traders from a practical standpoint, when I'm applying some of the theoretical ideas of analysis, I realize that there is a translation of result that often creeps in when we move from theory to the real world. It's what Gann called inertial overflight. He might have projected a market will stop to a penny, and sometimes it did, sometimes he might have been off by a few pennies. And the degree of slippage sometimes often is a result of the vagaries we find in the real world. We don't have perfect knowledge of financial systems, and it has to do with the nonlinearities that are present. Nevertheless, we can often, by combining a few different ideas, we can often get extremely accurate projections in both price and time, or time and price. Right. Harmonic analysis. Harmonic analysis is analysis to a large extent focused on on structure that evidences what we refer to as circular symmetry, or or roundness. There's a property of having circularity, or circular or round, a symmetrical property. Again, the most symmetrical structure possible is a circle. It has infinite symmetry. No matter what type of adjustment or change or transformation, if you rotate it, if you do what we call composite adjustment, if you flip it, if you translate it, it still retains its entire, it is indiscernible from its state prior to the change or the shift or the adjustment. And as such, there's nothing you can do that will alter its appearance and structure. You see, if I were to take a square, which has high degree of symmetry, but not as high as the circle, or a triangle, and by the way, it's not coincidence that from an analytical standpoint, the three most important geometric structures, circle, square, and triangle. I'm not sure if the square and the square and the triangle are possibly of equal, but I'm not sure. I honestly forgot which is of greater symmetry. If we had a square, if you rotate it in the plane 90 degrees, it'll still retain, but you can tell, well, that rotation, if you shifted it, say, if you shifted 90 degrees, it's indiscernible. If you shifted it, say, 45 degrees, you could tell its difference. There's a difference. It's at a different angle. Not so with the circle. That's an evidence of the higher degree of symmetry that the circle has relative to, say, a square, and similarly to a triangle. You see, there's infinite. There's an infinite symmetry that no other structure has. Okay. Harmonic analysis deals with changes in terms of, imagine a point on the circumference of a circle, and it allows us to more finely what I refer to as well, let's see. Fourier analysis is Fourier was a mathematician, physicist years ago who made great strides in understanding how to, let's say, break up or filter or decompose certain cycles that arise out of a circle. Remember, a circle is infinite, no beginning, no end, alpha and omega, to be philosophical about it, in a sense. It is the, other than the singularity or the point, which is the numerical representation for a philosophical or a kind of an ethereal idea. It's kind of bridging from the nothing to the something. And then the next possible structure that represents a geometric analog of a numerical and or a higher, call it divine concept, is the circle. It is completely unarbitrary. So it turned out that there's a type of, if we want to effect harmonic analysis, that is analyses of certain specific harmonic relationships that relate to a circle, that will let us know in advance when a market's going to change. Well, it turns out that Fourier made major strides. What he found out, without going into too much of the analysis, is that if this, again, it would be a lot nicer if I could show a dynamic representation, but imagine we had a point revolving, just iterating, constantly moving around the circle, and imagine you connected that point to its radius, to a diameter, any diameter. Well, the point, if you were to graph the changing that point's if you were to create a time plot of the position of that point on the circumference, it would look like a sine wave or a cosine wave. So folks, remember your, whatever that is, high school math, trig or whatever, sine and cosine, just trigonometric functions. If you're not with me, don't worry about it. Just suffice it to say, this is how, this is a type of analysis that enables greater understanding of the properties, specifically the harmonic point components of a circle. And it enables us to break up the specific cyclical components that create it's kind of like, by analogy, it's is someone has made a dish, a food, a casserole, and you like the dish, you want to get the recipe. The individual ingredients are analogous to you as an analyst trying to find out what cycles are important to a particular market. So it turns out that what Fourier did is create it turns out that there are certain what are called series or number series that enable us to more with specificity select out the salient, important, dominant cycles in a market. And if I can locate a dominant cycle in a market, and cycles are very, very persistent. They are, I submit to you, at the deepest level. You know, there's the superficial, what we call high level, and that stuff with the fundamentalist, even some, well, not so much the technician. Technician is looking at the price chart. So that's kind of intermediate in terms of its level of receptivity to information. The highest of levels is the level of day-to-day events, what we refer to again as fundamentals. The Fed comes out, FOMC, Janet Yellen makes a comment in terms of we're going to align and dictate and determine monetary policy and allow it to be data-driven. So if we see GDP numbers or consumer confidence numbers becoming more positive, or if GDP goes up and if they're consistent with our expected and registered rate of growth, then we'll know that we should do such and such. If we see that the numbers go down, we'll become more dovish in interest rate or monetary policy. If we see numbers increasing, there's a specter of inflation, we want to accordingly look for a possible rate hike so as to rein it in. That's the level that the fundamentalist walks in the realm of the fundamental idea. Much, much more deep than that is the cyclical component. And so it's more, on the fundamental front, at the topical level, things are constantly in flux, changing. One day, the stock market goes up because oil went up, and the equity sector perceives that to be bullish for equities. More people, if oil prices go up, it might cause a cessation of the shutting down of rigs in the U.S. oil production areas, and it will reopen some of the rigs, bringing more people back to work. More people go back to work, more discretionary income, the economy gets going again. The stocks react positively to that. Well, all of that's, or not. I could be completely off on that, but that's just a hypothetical scenario. All right. If that were the case, that's one logical chain of events on that level that would be a commentary on what you're seeing on your screen if you're a technician, or what you would just be aware of if you're a fundamentalist. Well, you can be aware of it if you're a cyclical analyst, but you're saying if it had been that set, but your takeaway and ultimate overriding contextual interpretation might say, well, yeah, I see that, but tomorrow it's going to be something else, and next week it'll be something else again, unless by coincidence it's the same thing. Or instead, it might not have been what happened today. It could have been something completely different or slightly different, or on the continuum of possibilities, anything is possible in the world in terms of events, two things coming together creating an event that impacted a financial market. Regardless, the cyclical theorist that's aware of the deeper components saying there is a constancy of cyclical propagation of certain dominant patterns or waves, if you will, that maintain their consistency because they are components of something so deeply embedded and responsible for what you are seeing at much, much higher levels. Yeah, the stuff that we see at higher levels is easy to think about and come by because we are bombarded, especially in 2016, with all the channels and avenues and pathways and conveyors of information. We've got the internet. We've got high frequency transmission. 100 years ago, at the turn of the early part of the 1900s, the problem that traders and investors and market operators had was the exact opposite of what we had. Everything was slow, and we couldn't get enough information. Today, we have the signal to noise ratio. We are overwhelmed with noise. I wake up every morning, I've got hundreds of emails, most of which are noise relative to valid signal that might be meaningful to me relative to whatever task I might have at hand or to which it's referring. So the important utility and object of harmonic analysis, to be a little more specific, is to discern the dominant cycles that arise from the shape of a circle, something so simple, so beautiful, so powerful and elegant, infinite symmetry. To the extent we can extract and know for a market, and it may be market specific, what cycles are dominant, that provides for me in a cause and effect sense some insight, when it does, as to why I can then connect that to what the news is day to day. Who is running for president? What happened in the debate? What will happen in the debate? What delegates are going to which candidate? What is ISIS doing on the other side of the world? What are they doing here? Missiles flying in the Persian Gulf. What is OPEC's next decision? All of these events are going to manifest and play out and occur. And I would submit, from my vantage point, I'm looking at them cyclically. And to the extent I can discern the dominant or cycle or set of cycles, typically it's more than one, but you typically have a hierarchy of dominant specific cyclical components that arise from, and it's certainly due to these harmonic relationships on a circle, which in turn arise or are orchestrated by certain numbers, in particular primes. Right? To that extent, if I know what the spectrum of critical relevant cycles are for a particular market, I merely project them out into the future. So I can generate a forecast and know with tremendous accuracy the stock market will shift on April 6th. Okay? And I know if it's going to be a top or a bottom. And I know on January 13 the market will change in a certain sector, because I'm looking at my projections of the deeper underlying components. Now, would I place a trade just on that? Well, you could. Probably I want to look for some accompanying evidence more so on all levels. To the extent we amass alternate types of information that have different origins is the extent to which just we're spreading and hedging our bet. The more different things in an obvious sense that converge and align, the less likely all of them are going to be wrong concerning that projected forecast. And correspondingly, the more likely you're looking at things and interpreting it in a manner that will be consistent with a more accurate projection. And so that the Fourier analysis was a major milestone. And when Fourier was doing his work, he didn't do it specifically. He was not an investor, as far as I know. He was doing it and applying for other phenomena that we were, in terms of trying to figure out the nature of matter and the atomic processes. Nevertheless, should it be too surprising? Everything in the financial market ultimately is an analog, however direct or indirect it might be, of the natural world around it. So the analysis applies. If cycles of frequency of resonation, and if I'm looking at an electron cloud and I want to discern probabilities in terms of chemical bonding, it may be completely on that level of thinking about it, completely different from what the price of Apple stock or Verizon stock or Pfizer Pharmaceutical or Amgen or Autodesk is going to do, or soybeans. Doesn't matter. Similar underlying, at very deep levels, there's nexuses and cross correlations. And to the extent we have a cyclical means of finding out the specific ingredients. You make a potato salad, what's the most important component? Well, what do you got to throw in your potatoes, your mayonnaise, your spices, your whatever. There are some ingredients that are more central. Who's going to make potato salad without potatoes? Yeah, you might have the mayonnaise, but it's It doesn't, so we want to focus on the most critical cycles first. W.D. Gann said this. He had codified most of his system by the 1911, but in early 1900s, 1903, 1904, I soon began to note the periodical recurrence of the rise and fall in stocks and commodities. This led me to conclude that natural law was the basis of market movements. In making my calculations on the stock market or any future event, I get the past history and find out what cycle we are in and then predict the curve for the future, which is a repetition of past market movements. Okay? Let me repeat, in making my calculations on the stock market or any future event, I get the past history and find out what cycle we are in. So however Gann was doing it, whether he was using this analysis, harmonic analysis of circles, and using series, sine and cosine series to do it, that's because that's mathematically how you do it. Or whether at that point in the early 1900s, they didn't have electronic computers. They didn't have software that does spectral analysis. They didn't even have electronic calculators in 1905, 1910. And they didn't have it in 1920, 1930. It's just been more recent. So a lot, but he could still avail himself of the concepts. I'm not sure if he did or didn't. I don't know. I know some of the things that he did. I know because in all of his writing, he said the cause has to do with the squares of the even and the odd numbers. This is why that's such a central component to the square of 9 for those of you who use who are familiar with square of 9 interpretation. Find out what the cycle we are in. Find out in other words, he's saying find the critical cycle or cycles, predict the curve for the future. There's a component of cyclical analysis called summation. There's a lot of, when we get into cycle analysis, there's summation, there's harmonicity, there's the summing of the cycles. The basic premise of the cyclical analyst is you identify the critical, integral, relevant, dominant cycles for a market, and you sum them, and you see the picture of the market. You then take that picture and project it out into the future, and that's your forecast. So even someone like Gann was, whatever he did, had the basic idea consistent with what this harmonic analysis is indicating. All right. Let me stop right there. These are 2 trades I want to talk about, folks. Any questions? And I'll get into the real stuff now. Is this the Wizard of Oz, the man behind? Yeah. This is the first specific question of a numeric nature. Where is the 0.14 coming from? Good, and I think Patrick, let me just see if the radius is equal to, no. Okay. When a market, remember the diagram, let me go back for that question to that slide, if I can. If I can back up. Very simple. It might be easier if you see it. Okay. Remember, okay, as we bring about, if we rotate one of these lines so that there's no space, the energy squirts across to the other side, to the other region. If this is a region of purely positive charge, like charges repel, so the frequency of oscillation will be increasing to the point where when there's no space, it's infinite. And that infinite frequency creates a stream, a breaking out of energy to a different compartment where there exists a valid space. The wavelength of resonance, the resonance meaning just my other word for oscillation, the vibration rate rather, it's vibrating at a rate equal to the length of the radius. That's the amplitude. Radius of the circle defines the amplitude of a cycle, but it's also defining the rate or the velocity of oscillation. Okay, when you talk like in computer cycles, hertz and so forth, that's the standard measure of velocity or frequency of oscillation. As the market, if the energy overwhelms the system, it breaks out beyond the boundary. That would be the circle, the circumference of the circle. Where does it go? It travels around the circle in both directions. I just drew the arrow one direction. All right. It will travel when it reaches one harmonic. that's equal. It just happens. It will, as it moves forward, now it's probably losing momentum and losing speed as it travels further and further, but it turns out it will have traveled a distance 3 times the radius, whatever that length of radius is, at the time it reaches the one harmonic level. Meaning, if the conjunction occurred due right at this due east, at the 3, if we imagine this to be the face of a clock, 3 o'clock position on the circle, whatever, if that's the point of conjunction, and you were to travel along that arc 15 degrees, which is 1/24th the distance of the 360. 15 degrees is 1/24th of the 360 degrees. It will have the market having, or rather the energy, not the market, the energy that escaped at this point will have exactly reached that one harmonic after having traveled 3 times this distance. That's the importance that I want you to figure out. Well, it turns out that the entire circumference, if you were to measure it, it's equal to 2 pi r squared, actually. 2 pi r squared. Remember that? Or yeah. That's, so if you only go half the distance, we don't have the 2. I take away the 2, it's only pi r. All right? So what's the, if we go 3.14 is pi. That's the same thing as pi. I didn't write the little Greek letter. I wrote in 3.14. You see? So if the distance between that the energy travels as it makes its way out, as it escapes from this point, is 3 radiuses, and it travels 3 times r, or 3 times the radius, the difference between 3 radius and 3.14, which is if it had traveled that extra harmonic, one more harmonic, that's the difference. The 0.14 and 3r, what's the difference? 3.14 versus 3r, the difference is 0.14. That's where I get the 1.4. So I'm just taking, what percentage of 0.14 is, what is 0.14 as a percentage, rather, of 3.14? Well, it's 4.4% of it. So if you take 4.5%, you could round it up, 4.5, 4.4% of 360, you get 16 degrees. And so that's close, 15.8 to be precise. This relationship, this harmonic, in other words, the energy would travel a distance that happens to be equal to 1. It doesn't end there. Because of coincidence is the point that the numbers are making. It ends there because that's an important resonant point. That's the significance, so the difference between the entire 1/2 of the circumference, 3.14 r, and the distance that the energy travels is 0.14. So what fraction of the half of the length of the semicircle is that? It's 4.4%, which turns out that it is equal, approximately, to 1 harmonic. That's the point I was trying to make there. Does that, Patrick? Yeah, it's the important difference. It's not coincidence that the energy stops there. That's the resting point that I was trying to make as to why, for example, some of the other slides were showing. It's not coincidence. That's a resting point. It's like driving down the freeway and you've been traveling for hours. You need a break. You pull in to the rest stop. This point on the circumference, it's not coincidence. It's a point where you refuel, and the system is more receptive. It's like, take the lid off the gas can and fill the canister. We're out of gas. Let's open up the gas thing and put the pump in and fill up again. These are certain. Every 15 degrees is very important position on the circle to fill up with energy, and that's why you get changes very often happening. Hopefully, someone's saying, okay, it's circumference equals 2 pi r. Yeah. All right. Or C. Okay. So how much? So someone's asking, or Patrick, I guess you're still asking, how did I come up with 3r. That's the distance that if the energy, it turns out it will travel that distance. If you had a conjunction resonator, which is what this is, if you had energy and you had this experiment, if you were doing this as a thought experiment, or if you're doing this in the real world energetically, the distance that the energy, if it releases along the outside of the conjunction or outside of the resonator, if you had, what is it, trying to think, a capacitor where you had two metal plates that are together, for example, the distance that the energy would leave or that would travel around the circumference is exactly equal to 3 times the radius. So that's how I come up with the 3r. That's just an empirical fact. There may be a theoretical reason for it. If there is, I'm just not thinking of it at the moment. But empirically, as a result of the laws of motion of the energy, that the vectors that are responsible for the energy flow around the circumference, it will travel a distance equal to 3 times the radius. That's how I come up with the 3r. Right. Let's see if there are any other. Does the harmonic allow us to predict future price movements? Yes, yes, RL. That's one of the, certainly, to varying amounts of accuracy. So yes, that's the point of this. Yes. Ice crystals, the lattices that are, RL's asking about ice crystals, the structure that we see in snowflakes, in ice crystal lattices, and in not only ice crystals, chemical, all sorts of solutions on chemistry and in physical processes in our body, all of these, everything in our universe, life itself, the wide, if we look at the double helix, DNA, RNA, deoxyribose nucleic acid, if you look at it is a spiral. Well, a spiral is we're moving out of the plane, out of a two-dimensional surface, a circle, and then you can create, in the same way that the trigonometric functions are analogs of a circle, but it's a two-dimensional analog, but we can also move into additional dimensions. I don't want to complicate that, but the fact, I thought of it because RL is bringing up the fact of crystals, and ice crystals in particular, and the structures we see ultimately have to do with harmonics, which in turn have to do with certain numbers. I submit again that if you go follow this through even deeper, the primes are orchestrating a lot of it. If you look at the equation of the logarithmic spiral that one of the other slides indicated, the exponents to which the base, and it's often an exponential base, are often primes. That's not, so the primes are integral in how a system and or a structure, the ultimate results of some of the structures we see, and for dynamic systems, often controlling and influencing and informing the behavior of systems that are dynamic, such as a stock or a commodity or an option, whatever. Options more indirectly, but still the same. Okay, I want to so your good point. If I'm able to manifest this onto trading, it would be uncanny to say the least. Yeah, I agree, RL. But here now, you might say, well, if it's so easy and I have this, why are we even talking? Why would I not have by now captured? First of all, I'm not the only one that knows this. I think I certainly am not. Let me not be so. Yeah, I don't want you to think that this information is secret and solely in my sole domain. I learned this from other people and other traders, and my entire 34-year career, I've been learning and adding and adjusting and searching. So, number one, yes, it is, even though it's not perfect, by the way. So let me qualify. Yeah, folks, this is not, I'm not saying, because there are other factors. For example, and I'll make it explicit. First of all, one of the how how can I, by analogy, say this? One of the problems that arises in this type of analysis or any other, that's you know, if we're talking harmonic analysis in particular, but I was saying harmonic analysis is as effective as it is to a large extent based on even deeper principles. The symmetry is present in a circle, which by extension can shift to a, if we extend the circle to a spiral. Think of the DNA as just an example, but it's just an extension of a circle. A spiral is nothing more than an extended circle, but the circle is nothing more than an extended point. And the point comes about, and the motion and the adjustments and the transitions often are directed more deeply by certain numbers. Which numbers? Primes in particular. And there are what are called lazy primes. There are called sexy primes. If you really want to get into number theory, it's breaking out beyond the boundaries of this webinar for now. But people who study this, it gets very, very. You can drill down to deeper levels. Is the point I want to make. But to your point, yes, this is astounding results, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect. Here are some of the reasons why, just in an obvious sense. I may do my harmonic analysis, let's say, and come up with and locate a very dominant cycle specific to a given market. Let's say the S&P. I do a lot of work in the E-mini on all time frames. If that's all I go, if I am not aware of, maybe there's another cycle almost as dominant, but not as dominant. It's second in the hierarchy on the totem pole, let's say. To the extent I'm not aware of it, let's say, maybe I'm incomplete in my analysis. Maybe I don't do it thoroughly or correctly. Maybe I make a mistake. We're all human, we're error. So that can show up and alter the results of my analysis. In standard cyclical analysis, there are things that are called left and right translation. So that if a larger, maybe you are aware of a set of cycles that is peculiar to a market on a different time frame, but there's another more dominant cycle on a longer time period that is impacting and influencing the smaller scale cycles you are looking at. And to the extent you're not aware of that, it can adversely impact the results. There's a lot of rare areas for error, areas and ways by which error can creep into the analysis. And this is why, you know, in a practical, broader sense for trading purposes, folks, it, in my view, is imperative to combine the analysis with capital allocation criteria, risk threshold rules, and protocols. Critical. Money management, in other words, which is a completely different aspect of our business at large, but I feel essential component to complement the analytical consideration. All right, folks. If you you can look at the formula for any structure. We had a circle. You can look at that in any standard geometry book. It doesn't matter. I see now. Okay. All right. Can I review how this is used to predict price? The very short answer is, to the extent you have a spectrum of what you believe and have identified as dominant cycles. Now this is different people do it different way. I do it certain ways. Who is it? There's the MESA program that I'm not sure if it's John Eller's. I can't remember. He did a lot of work years ago. There's a lot of software today that will do this. There are a series of, again, numerical series of cosines and sines. That's getting a little, I teach people to do this who are interested. Many people are not interested. It gets a little hairy. That's okay. This is what we do if you want to. There are some pure numerical methods by which we dissect and discern cycles. I gave a clue. One of the, I was just being a little, I don't give away all the ideas. Some people are, depends on the type of work. For example, I mentioned this is a very important, and ultimately this is due to primes. The 1/12th root of 2 is a very important number. It brings me, that's another number. Actually, And these are two separate relationships that different investigators and market researchers have come to that enables me with tremendous accuracy to project time points. Some situations, some numbers work better for certain markets. So there are some specificity. Other cyclical cycles are more universally applicable. So it depends. There's a lot of specificity when there is. Sometimes there are more universal applications of certain cycles. For example, it's not a coincidence, folks, that if you look at any standard set of oscillators, RSI, your generic oscillators, stochastic, MACD, the number 14 comes up over and over. That's a standard default for a lot of different technical tools we use. That's because it's the 1/2 harmonic of 28. Well, 28, you might say, well, so what? What's important about 28? Well, it closely correlates with the lunar cycle. Well, you might say, well, so what? You're getting loony. You ask farmers and people, the 28 point and a fraction, whatever it is, I forgot, it's 28 days approximately. Walter Bresser did a lot of work years ago. You never should utilize in moving averages or oscillators periods of default that exceed the dominant cycle of the market, or that is imputing and informing and moving that market. Always, because it's analogous to, like, if I get a splinter trying to utilize a large set of pliers to extract the splinter. You've got to go in with the size of the instrument that you're attempting to utilize in a manner to assist you in extracting that very small has to be a wavelength similar to the magnitude and the scale of the system you want to apprehend. So the large point of contact of a set of pliers would be completely non-resonating. It would not be able to give you any information. I've got to be at a wavelength equal to or smaller than, preferably, than the wavelength of the system I want to measure or learn something about. Otherwise, I won't be able to have an interaction. The only way we learn anything about our world, our universe, is by bouncing something up, the object of our interest. And by virtue of the interplay, the interaction, the carom, the resulting, that's how, when you have what over in Europe, the Large Hadron Accelerator, the way we learn more about the nature of our universe and atom in particular is by bombarding something up against it. Okay? No, nothing different there. Yeah. Now, one of the points, John, sir, I talked to him many years ago, a number of times, but one of the things that Ehlers brings up, there's a little difference among researchers who do this, difference of view, how do I say this? The persistency of a given cycle, depending on, some cycles, if they're not really dominant, are going to have a lesser degree of persistency. One of the points that Ehlers brought up many, many years ago, and he was not the first, but he brought it up, and to his credit, that certain cycles, if they are not dominant, have less than, there's a minimal, or there's a decrease in the persistency of the cycle. So as such, you cannot depend on it as being in terms of inaccuracy. So this is where types, completely different, I'm going to shift gears here, where things like nonlinear theory, chaos theory is the common terminology, but when we utilize what are called rescaled range analyses to determine the viability of a given cycle, or more precisely, its magnitude, its length. What's the period of the cycle? And I use a specific equation I haven't mentioned here, that tells me what the composite cycle should be and its likelihood for being persistent or not. And so John, I believe, is a big proponent of that, and I think it's a good idea. It's a little more complicated. I just wanted to give a general idea today about harmonic analysis. The specifics can get very specific, so I'm not sure who's out there. If we've got beginner traders out there and analysts, don't be put off. You start at the beginning and we take it step by step. Those of you who are more aware of things like spectral analysis and different types of transforms and number series that we can use to decompose cyclical components of the bigger picture, great, and I'm happy to go into that with you. But the main thing I wanted to, more deeply, I think whether someone like Gann was utilizing this or not, there are other methods by which we can, there are a number of different procedures analytically that we can utilize to give us insight as to the specific cycles that are at work in a market. And so again, the practical application, just to reemphasize this, is to the extent I have a spectrum of cycles that I feel are dominant for a market, that which has been in the past will tend to persist into the future until it doesn't. And so we have statistical tests, i.e. rescaled range analysis and similar type analyses that enable us to monitor quantitatively the degree of persistency of a cycle and the degree to which it is persistent or anti-persistent. So that's there are a lot of filters that we can apply to improve the analysis. The analysis part of trading, and one of the things that appealed to me many years ago, is the fact that we get rewarded for thinking outside of the box. There are no rules other than, for me, from a practical standpoint, I remember at 24 years old, some 30 years ago, saying I wanted to just have the capacity. What thrilled me about the business of trading was open-ended profits. Open-ended profits. I remember at Merrill Lynch when I got licensed on this as a Series 7, and then a year later I found out about the commodities, and I wanted to go get my 3, and I had to go talk to a guy. He was about probably a couple of years younger than I am now, but I was 20-some years old, and he said, and because he was, they were screening to see if I can get applied to get trading futures as well. And he welcomed me into his office and he said, "Welcome, young man, to the last bastion of free enterprise on the planet." And I was thrilled. I didn't even have a concept or half a clue of what I knew, but I knew it was something good. So I said that to say there are no rules in this business other than to do those things that are going to serve to create more and more greater degrees of edge. The way that we use the harmonic analysis is, to the extent you believe you have a set of cycles that work and have worked historically, you can expect that they will work similarly into the future. So we obtain a projection, and then we make adjustments as necessary. In the same way, when we deliver or send a flight vehicle from Earth to a distant, a planetary body, an astral body, there are, based on what's called the three-body problem, people, some of the greatest geniuses of all time have worked on this. We still haven't solved this problem. It's not perfect. Pure Newtonian mechanics will not do the job because of the nonlinearities, and this is where the whole area of nonlinear theory comes up. And it's due to that there's no mystery why we have inaccuracies in our forecast. And it has to do with the measurement problem. When we measure a system at any given point, we cannot, due to the interference of the device we're using or the procedures we're using to measure the thing we want to study, there's going to be some, however infinitesimally small, amount of error. And we have done amazingly well in the last 200 years at decreasing the amount of our error, improving the accuracy of our measurement and its corresponding precision. The problem germane to forecasting of anything, whether it's a weather front, what's the weather going to be like a week from now, a month from now, or the stock market, or anything, a soybean or a jelly bean, is that the error does not stay constant. It grows at an exponential trajectory over time. This is an intrinsic problem to financial forecasting, and it sets a limitation. That's good. At least we know that we need, it would be worse if we didn't even know that. We know some of the attributes of the area that we're working in. All right. So hopefully you have some insight at deeper levels, and certain things, folks, behind, I forgot, still hogs trade. I got into this for just the practical stuff. We had a breakout. It's actually up higher today. I printed this out last night, folks, a chart. If for those of you who are on the security side, there are ETFs, COW. Well, no, actually, there is an ETF that is an analog. This is a livestock. This is a derivative trader. If you don't trade derivatives, don't worry about it. Those of you know Elliott wave. This is a fifth wave. I'm projecting higher prices. We, in fact, move higher today. I bought a breakout above this horizontal, this resistance. You can see this was the end of wave 3. For those of you who know Elliott, or I surmise that it is. Okay, so that's one situation. The other situation, I'm just going to tell you a little bit. I have not yet entered a trade. This is gold. If you're on the stock side, you trade GLD or an ETF that's a good proxy or analog or a fund for gold prices, but this is a gold chart. This was a time point, this yellow line, March 8. Notice the top here. I don't know if it's not the ultimate top, I don't think, but it is a top that came in a few days prior to, like 2 days before my projection. So I had projected March 8 for gold weeks, if not months ago. I don't remember when I did. Okay, these lines represent future projections. For gold, the next one is April 12th. I didn't put the date here, but that's this line here. This is the 3-8 one, this yellow line. That's come and gone. Today is the 10th. 2 days ago, I projected a turn. This is my next projected time point, April 12th. The next one after that, this one, July 11th. Okay, I've got similar projections for all the markets that I trade. Okay, the ones for those of you who attended my program, what was it, 3-4 weeks ago, where I was talking about interest rates and bonds. Okay, and we had a turning point, and I'm short the bonds. For those of you who follow interest rates in the Treasury market, the 30-year Treasury, I'm short the futures. You can trade TLT. I got short at 166. Right before I tuned in for today's presentation, we were just trading above 163. So we're doing well in that situation. I'm also in a position in the equity sector. So my next time target for the stock market, the last one was March 2nd. The next one on the horizon, April 6th. I didn't put a chart into that because time, but just wanted to give you a little bit. I'll hold on. I'm going to do something in gold probably in the next few sessions. I'm already in hogs in the long one. If a trader is not in, the specifics, would be a function of how you define your trading, what instruments, how much funds, your tolerances for risk, etc., a host of other variables. But in principle, I expect further appreciation in hogs or in a market that would be an applicable proxy or analog of that. So those are two situations I am interested in looking at right now. There are others, but again, for the sake of time. All right. Folks, again, it's been a pleasure. And if you have specific questions concerning the analysis, Ariel, you're asking me, do I expect bonds to go lower? Yes. Yes, the quick answer. I could spend another 30 minutes telling you why. I know the FOMC, I mentioned them as an example earlier, I think. I think they're scheduled to meet next week. Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's an or some kind of meeting with the Fed next week. I just mentioned that kind of tongue-in-cheek because I don't start there. Whether they're meeting next week or tomorrow or next year is of much lesser, not completely unimportant. They're going to meet when they meet and say what they say and do what they do. Trying to discern and translate Fed talk is an art and you got to take a course at MIT anyway to do that. So all the more reason, and now that I think of it, to look at those factors and those parameters and those vectors that are at work consistently at levels that are in egress to that much deeper. Let's look at the root of the system and see, and we can discern in advance often with amazing accuracy how that system will manifest on ground level. I often find it interesting to at least speculate and project and forecast what the Fed is going to do based on my interpretation of the chart, the history of the chart, and the underlying cyclical components that are the ingredients of that financial soup, as it were. And if I can dig deeper, and see the numerical components at work, i.e. the primes and how they're interacting. So depending on the level of interest and what level of and mode or vantage point of interpretation, you can find, if you dig in the right way, the factors that are responsible. If you're a fundamentalist, you're going to be looking at, where, interactions between different sectors, interest rates, European easing of rates, Mario Draghi over there, and what the Bank of Japan is doing in Asia, and what our central bank is doing, and how are people going back to work. All of those factors and more that would be germane to a fundamentalist. If you're a technician, you're going to look at the chart and the price and all the cadre of technical tools that you feel are relevant. If you're a cyclical analyst, you're going to be looking at that. I think in the scheme of things, one should always be looking in the world today at as many things as you can. These are just different types of information with a focus especially on where are they coming together, where are the clusters and convergences and alignments occurring, and that will serve in a statistical sense to improve our odds for success. And then remember, this is just the analysis. I think it's of critical necessity to complement all of this with good money management. So folks, I'm out of time. That's why I'd love to go into more detail, but I'm already over. But we have recorded today's presentation, and you can, if you want details on accessing or receiving the recording, or if you'd like to know more details about the courses and curriculum and what I do and what my coworkers do, contact, again, Peter Newman heads that department, so handles all of the details of that. I just do the teaching, and I do teaching to all levels, pure beginners. I was one at 24 years old, and every other, in wherever you are, if I have knowledge in those areas, I'm happy to do it. But Peter Newman would be the person, and you have the contact information on your screen. And once again, happy for those of you who have attended. Thanks for coming, and look forward to talking to you on similar topics in the near future. Have a great day and great trading ahead. Bye-bye.